What is something that is weighing on your mind that you may need advice on? Am I the unreasonable one for refusing to split my inheritance with my siblings? I'll try to summarize as much as possible. I am a 19-year-old female. I have an estranged grandpa more or less. He's my dad's father, but my dad hardly had a relationship with him. I have two other siblings, one younger, 13, and one older, 26. My grandma divorced my grandpa when my dad was only 10. So he lived with my grandma his whole life in a different state and didn't see him. When he got older he saw him a little more and my grandpa started coming around a little bit more as well. He'd stay for a week at a time and then go home. He was an old, bitter man to be honest. He never got remarried and lived his whole life in his coastal town with the same friends he'd had his whole life. He wasn't pleasant to be around and could hold grudges longer than anyone I've ever met. But regardless of this, he was filthy rich. He owned a successful business that he sold for $1 million. He retired after selling, but his house sits on an island as well as the biggest piece of land on the island. So it sold for well over $3 million. I was never close with my grandpa, but I took after his sister who is an RN and he adores her. He always told me that he was proud to see me follow in her footsteps. He died a few months ago. Since then, my family has been torn apart. He left everything to me. He essentially liquidated all of his assets and it ended up being close to $8 million. I was shocked. I didn't and still don't know what to do with the money, but I'm going to save it. My dad and stepmom as well as my siblings are hounding me to split the money with them. I just can't do it. My dad is an alcoholic who never said anything nice about his dad. Despite him being bitter, my grandpa actually bought my dad a $300,000 house. My dad would 100% drink away any money given to him. As far as my siblings, my brother has full financial support from my grandma as he is the favorite and he's very wasteful and ungrateful. He never talks to me and always is very mean to me when he does. My little sister is the only person I've actually considered. She's very young and that's really the only thing stopping me. Her mom is money oriented and would take the money from her. So I'm waiting until she turns 18 and I offered to pay for her college. But now my family is telling me I'm unfair and the money doesn't belong to me and I'm not deserving of it. That I'm too young and I'll waste it on cars and clothes. I don't agree and now they're all threatening to cut me off and never speak to me, or even sue me if I don't give them all a chunk of the money. I don't know what to do and I'm buckling under pressure here. I've already had 2 police officers out to my house because my dad is claiming I stole the money from him. Everything was through an attorney. I know I did nothing wrong legally, but morally, I don't know. So am I the unreasonable one? Daughter's friend, F18, is making me, M45, uncomfortable. I have known this girl for years. She always was a sweet girl and one of the things I always liked about her and my daughter was that they were never the type to be 14 going on 40. Her family life is stable as far as I know and up until around 6 months ago she treated me like an adult, that is, a vaguely human-shaped object that dispensed lifts and crap music. But around the time of my wife leaving my daughter and I, she and my daughter started making jokes between each other about getting me a new girlfriend. When I'd overhear, I'd ignore it and the two of them would go all red and embarrassed. Then it seems to have escalated to her getting uncomfortably flirty with me. I acted dumb initially, but had to actually say something to her about it, because it was getting way too frank. It stopped for a while, but after turning 18, she started up again and just made fun of me when I tried to tell her to stop. So, to avoid anything else, I cut myself out of giving rides if she was in the party or being anywhere where she might be. But the past 2 weekends, she has called me in the middle of the night drunk as hell saying that she's going to walk home if I don't pick her up. So I pick her up. She gets really handsy to the point where I was having trouble driving, and every time I stop, she tries to put my hands on her. The first time I got her home, she got herself under control, and while her mother raised an eyebrow, she mostly believed my denials of getting her into this state. The second time, she didn't and it was bad. I was telling the truth, and even I thought I was a sleaze. I told her mother that I was indeed stupid for not calling her instead and should the girl try anything like that again, I'll call her instead of going anywhere. I really don't know what is going on here. I am a balding, overweight middle-aged man who feels like I am the butt of a joke somewhere having this 18-year-old acting so obsessively over me. I have spoken to my daughter about it who initially thought it was funny, but after a conversation with her friend is now kinda worried as well. I am sure that something else is going to happen, and I just need some advice on getting her to realize she should be with boys her own age. Am I the unreasonable one for telling my husband we are supporting my mother till she dies? So I'm the daughter of first-generation migrants to America. My father wanted to move here for more opportunities, and my mother, being a devoted housewife, moved along with him. In my homeland's culture, women don't work once they're married, and my mother married straight out of high school, so she'd never had a job before. My parents had me here, and when I was 8, My father passed away from cancer. My mother could have taken the easy route. She could have moved back to her homeland where relatives would look after us, but instead, she chose to get several jobs here, for cash so no benefits. No one was willing to have a middle-aged foreigner that speaks little English work for them legitimately, and work hard to raise me in the US. If she'd gone home, I would probably have had to work on a farm till I died. But because of her, I got to have an education and have a well-paying office job. Since my mother had no benefits at her various jobs, I've always known it would be my duty to look after her in her old age. I've always been very upfront about everyone I've been in a relationship with, that my mother is a part of the package. That until she dies, I'll be paying for her bills, rent and some money for her to spend. My husband agreed to this when we started dating, and after we got married. But with Corona, he got laid off, and we've been living off my income. I make quite a bit more than him, so we're still living solidly middle-class lives. It's just that we don't have excess fun money anymore for hobbies till he gets another job. Obviously, my mother also is only receiving what she needs to get by too. And now that it's affecting him, he's been making snide comments about my mother being a freeloader, and that she's still young enough to be working. She's in her late 60s. I told him to cut it out, that he knew what he was signing up for when he married me, so unless he wants to leave me, this is how it's going to be. I didn't say the dreaded D word, but implying it was enough he stormed out. I got a few messages from my sister-in-law and brother-in-law about how I was being ridiculous expecting my husband to be second fiddle to my mother. So, am I the unreasonable, for telling my husband that looking after my mother is a done deal? Am I the unreasonable one for demanding that my 15-year-old son's girlfriend get a paternity test for their alleged baby? My 15-year-old son came to my husband and I last week, telling us that his girlfriend is 7 months pregnant. As someone who became a mother very young, I am devastated and so deeply disappointed. They've been together for about a year, but we always thought it was a kid's thing, nothing harmless. Regardless, when under our watch, we kept them under constant supervision, so this was all a shock. We know the girl's parents and believed we were all on the same page about our kids. Turns out we were wrong. When we called them, they spun some bullcrap about how their daughter had already told us, basically placing the blame on their child for us not knowing she's been pregnant for 7 months. On top of this, they've only known for about a month or two, meaning she's had basically no prenatal care. We were trying to figure out what our next steps should be, so I called my older brother. Not wanting him to keep a secret from his family, I told him I'd individually call his wife and 2 daughters to tell them myself. When I called the youngest one, 16, who is close to my son, her first reaction was, "I wonder if it's even his." Upon hearing this, I immediately questioned my son, who then informed me of their very colorful relationship. She's apparently a serial cheater, even though I didn't even think that was a factor in a 15-year relationship. I've never felt like such a bad mother listening to all that was going on in my son's life that I didn't know about, knowing he's never trusted me enough. After this I contacted the parents of his girlfriend, and as gently as I could, informed them that we wanted a paternity test done. They flipped. They were pissed about what I was accusing their daughter of, and saying the trauma of even bringing that up to her is too much for a heavily pregnant child. While I might agree, this is my child's life that's gonna be deeply impacted too. So my husband and I decided we're gonna keep trying to get a paternity test done no matter what it takes. Am I the unreasonable one for demanding this? As bad of a parent as I feel like I am right now for letting this happen, I feel I'm nowhere near as bad as the girl's parents. Update. Just to clarify, we've gone over this with my son and he's on board and understands why a paternity test is important. We have definitely discussed safe sex with our son. As I said, I was a very young mother and it was important to me to make sure they're educated. I in no way blame the girl, I just want to protect my son. Update. So we've been doing a lot of research overnight. Obviously I haven't slept well, and found how non-invasive the procedure could be, and the results come back in a week or so. We are gonna go to the girl's parents with this information and try to explain why it's important for all of us to know. Thank you all for your input. I'll try and post an update when I know more. Also, as a side note, I wouldn't consider myself overly controlling or a helicopter parent. As I said, my son knows about safe sex, knows sex is normal, and has even asked my husband for condoms in the past, as we told him he should do whenever he needed to. The constant supervision we kept them under only applies to what happens in our house, and I don't think that's an outlandish rule. Just because we're sex positive doesn't mean we're celebratory or encouraging of it. Am I the unreasonable one for refusing to share any of my baking with my sister? So I, 16F, like to bake. I buy my own ingredients and make something every week or so. I share with my mom and sister, 21F, and sometimes her friends if they're over. It's not like I can eat everything myself anyway. This happens every weekish, for the past year and a half, for a while. So a few days ago when I finished work, grocery store, I texted my sister to ask if there was any food, or if I needed to buy some. She told me there was food, so I went straight home. When I came home there was no food, there was meat in the freezer, but no time to defrost, no bread, no eggs, not much. Couldn't order food, since it was past 9 p.m. My sister had ordered 2 pizzas, so I asked if I could have a few slices. I offered to pay for them. She refused. She wanted to eat them for lunch the next day. I offered to pay for the whole pizza, so she could order a fresh one tomorrow for lunch. She refused again. This wouldn't have been an issue if she told me there was no food. I would have bought something on my way home. But she apparently didn't check. I ate some plain rice with salt. It wasn't too bad, but I'm still annoyed she's been eating my baking all this time, and couldn't spare 2 slices of pizza. I even offered to pay. She doesn't pay for the baking, even though she makes much more than I do. She's been acting a bit entitled with the baking already, getting annoyed when I didn't make something she wanted or enough for her to take to her friends, so this was extra annoying. So the next time I baked something and she came to grab some, I told her no, I don't want to share. She got annoyed and told me I could have some pizza, which had been in the fridge for 3 days. If it's such a big deal, I refused again. I don't get much joy from cooking for her anymore. My mom thinks it's petty, but doesn't want to get involved. My sister has been huffy about it, but I don't feel like I have to share at this point. Am I the unreasonable one? I'm a 28-year-old woman and every boyfriend I've had for the past 9 years has died. I feel cursed and don't know how to, or if I can ever, move on. Obviously this needs a bit of backstory and it's a long one, so from the start. The first partner I had was when I was 18 years old and fresh out of high school and his name was James. It was a casual relationship in the sense that both of us were just enjoying that transient stage of life where you travel, work a bunch of random jobs, meet new people and let go of old ones. But it was a serious relationship in terms of the way we felt about each other. We adored each other and never really got sick of each other. Neither of us had any future plans, but we just didn't care because we felt like we could tackle anything together and both of us were independent spirits in a way too. Unfortunately, a year and a half into our relationship, James was in a car accident, not his driving that caused it, and didn't make it. That was an awful time in my life that broke me apart, but with support from friends and family as well as James' family, I managed to continue moving forwards in life. A couple of years later and I'm 21, I meet Hamish. He knew pretty early on what I had been through and was an absolute gem about everything. He was in his late 20s and had kind of secured his place in the world already, and in a way he kind of anchored me, something I didn't know how much I needed and wanted till it did. We made a partnership and after about 8 months together I moved in with him. He had his own house and a steady job already, and I had just started my degree, so I played homemaker a lot of the time. Did contribute with a part-time job too, and things really fell into place naturally. I had finally began to trust that I could be happy again when I got a call from his worksite that he had been injured at work and was en route to hospital. Unfortunately, he sustained a serious head injury and didn't regain consciousness. His family, who I had only met a couple of times, pulled him off life support a week later, and that was that. I fell into a much deeper depressive hole this time around. It didn't help that I also lost the home I had with him since we were not married at his time of death, so in a blur of grief and depression I was also packing boxes and had to move back in with family because I couldn't afford a rental on my own. I dropped out of college and tried to figure out some semblance of normal again. At 24, about 10 months after Hamish's passing, I meet Adam at a community event. We hit it off, but I was definitely not looking for a partner at that point in time, so we were friends for a few months and spent a lot of time doing activities together, volunteering together and just being in each other's company. He introduced me to his wide circle of friends, which really helped me out because after Hamish passed, a lot of my old ones had not stuck around. Adam and I reached boiling point on a group camping trip and ended up sharing a tent and confessing feelings. He understood my hesitation to take things further and basically said he could be whatever I needed him to be at that point in time. As time goes on, we go on more dates and get more intimate, and I eventually realize we are well and truly in a relationship. I struggled a lot with waiting for the other shoe to drop, and just as I was letting go of that feeling, the worst happened and Adam was killed very suddenly. At this point I basically had a nervous breakdown and did spend some time in an inpatient facility because of my inability to cope with the situation at hand. I didn't know how it was all happening again. Fast forward 2 years to 27. I graduated my degree after many years of part-time study. I'm living independently, finally. I'm going to therapy regularly. I'm trying to live life just one day at a time. I am not looking for any kind of relationship, because frankly I am too petrified to. I have a small, but close group of friends who have supported me through the worst and the best times in my life, and I them. And after landing a graduate position in my field, I meet Joel, a sweet, kind, funny, adoring 39-year-old. Everything you could want in a partner. We both go back and forth for a while, but about 6 months after meeting we begin dating, and about 6 months after we start dating, he gets diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. As you already know from the title of my post, unfortunately his treatment plan failed and I lost Joel only a little over a year after meeting him. I am not generally a superstitious person, but at this point I feel as though there is a curse on me, that I am undateable. I can't imagine ever wanting to date another man again. Because what if by doing so I am condemning him to death? When I expressed those fears to Joel, he understood, and it was one reason why it took some time for us to be together. And then look what happened. I still receive therapy regularly, but therapy only goes so far and I feel like I need some true advice. The other main thing I struggle with is the way people in my town look at me. It is a mid-sized regional city. Some people were at all 4 funerals. To give you some idea of the size of the town, even though none of my late partners knew each other. Everyone knows of everyone here, and people stare at me as though I'm poisonous, or guilty or something. I wonder all the time about whether I should leave town and move somewhere fresh. I know that doesn't solve all my problems, but I feel like at least the people wouldn't have preconceived notions of me, and should I ever date again that men won't recoil from me. I feel totally lost and I am not sure how my 20s has been stolen by so much grief and heartache, and how I became a magnet for death. I feel about 40 years older than any other 28-year-old. DLDR, I have been a magnet for death and have lost 4 boyfriends. I feel like a cursed object and am unsure whether moving will help me start fresh or just exacerbate my isolation. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories delivered to you. Thanks for listening. See you later.